Our speaker, who will take us up to lunchtime, is an incredible speaker. We got to chat a little bit earlier on this morning, and I know we're in for a real treat. He's going to start off by asking you a question. Does your keynote have global appeal? Do you want to share it with a wider audience, but just don't know where to start? I think that's many of us, isn't it? In this workshop, you'll discover practical first steps to take as you explore how to take your business global. Our speaker is a thought leader in the area of leadership and building trust. He works with CEOs and their teams, disarming corporate terrorists and introducing trust as a business currency. He is the president of the Global Speakers Federation and was the president of the National Speakers Association of New Zealand. Would you please welcome Elias Kanaris?
What would you do if you had a wardrobe malfunction? Would it totally change your life forever? Well, it was an ordinary Tuesday, and I was at my parents' house in Wimbledon, about to go to London Heathrow to fly over to Chicago. And suddenly I realized that I had a wardrobe malfunction. I had forgotten to pack a tie. Now, you would have thought, that's not really that much of a wardrobe malfunction, let's be honest. But at the time, I was about to fly business class, all the way through from London Heathrow to Chicago. Now, that was quite an important aspect. So when I arrived at Heathrow Airport, I made a decision to go to find the tie rack. Now, that shows you how old this story is. Found a suitable tie, put it on, went into the lounge and waited for them to call me up for my flight. As I say, it was an ordinary Tuesday. The date just so happened to be September 11. Can you remember what you were doing on September 11? Well, when I was on the plane with my tie on at the front of business class, sitting next to Prakash, who joined us somewhere from India, at least 36 hours prior to joining us on that aeroplane. So between us, we did the usual business class communication. And that was about it. Now, they served us lunch, and I was sitting there having lunch, and then they took away all of our trays, took out my laptop, started to type in a note I was going to send to my wife when I got to the airport in Chicago. Now, I can't tell you if it was the panicked look on the staff that came through, or whether it was the horrendous sound that I heard, which later I found out was them dumping fuel. But I realized as Captain Ballard came on to tell us that there had been a significant incident in the US. And FAA had shut down all airspace. They diverted our airplane to a place called Gander Airport in Newfoundland. We were one of 38 airplanes that ended up across there. A lot of you probably remember what happened, but I managed to find a short video courtesy of USA Today, which I'd like to share with you to explain what happened to the 38 plane loads of people who were stranded on 9/11.
2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center.
I'm just informed of the horrible tragedy in Washington and in New York City. September 11th, 2001, my partner and I were finishing a vacation in Europe, and the plane all of a sudden dropped elevation really quickly and then made a turn to the right. It looked like all of a sudden we were flying to the North Pole. I thought, how crazy is that? All of a sudden the captain came on and he said, due to a terrorist attack in the United States, we'll be landing in Gander, Newfoundland. They were going to take us into the town and I don't know what.
I was only on for about an hour or so when I got a call from the town manager saying We're expecting some planes to land in Gander. Looks like that the airspace is going to be shut down because there was a terrorist attack on the United States.
This was a tiny town, population 9,000, and once those 38 planes had landed, they ended up with 6,500 stranded passengers, nearly doubling their population. And I have to admit, I've never heard of the place before, but essentially it's a small island province in Canada on the northeast tip of North America. The question is, what were they going to do with us?
Then all of a sudden, we're looking to our airport, and here comes 7,000 people. We were able then to be able to go up to these people, put our arms around them and say, it's okay, we have you, don't worry.
No questions was asked. People just came out, gave up their time, their food, their homes and everything.
Well, once we knew all the flights were on the way to Gander, I think the whole town kind of came together. Even just going to the grocery store and getting prepared for when they all landed to welcome them to our homes.
The people of Gander, they'd been cooking all day, and they had taken the time to set up television because they knew that's what we wanted to see, were the images of what was going on. And they set up telephones, and there were people that made calls over 30 different countries, and they'd said, don't worry about paying us any money, just make the call.
Doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what religion you are. It doesn't matter what sexual orientation you are. It's people, and you need help. You help them.
I know I was a little bit nervous, you know, being a gay couple in a foreign country, small town, but we were treated like everybody else.
We almost became like one big family. Instead of having 9,000, we had 16,000 in the family.
When the last plane left Gander, and we were at the airport, talking to the passengers, when we saw the tears of joy and the smiles on their faces, we were paid in full.
It was something that I'll never forget, and it's changed my life.
Our people responded, and that's something that I'll always remember.
"5 days. We ended up being hosted by the Salvation Army. This was a story of collaboration. As I got off the aeroplane, I was delusional. I thought, you know, they kept us for 24 hours from takeoff at London Heathrow till they had set up all of the security to get us off the aeroplane and get us through to the Salvation Army. I still had my tie on. I thought they'll turn us around quickly and go back. And it wasn't until about 5 o'clock that afternoon when I finally figured out I wasn't going home, Toto. So I took off my tie and we worked our way through. 5 days. As we finally got the call ahead to go back on the airplane, Prakash looked at me and he says, "Oh, where's your lucky tie?" So really, I'm going to talk to you about how to get your fellow by speaking globally. Who'd like to speak globally? Great, great. As a matter of interest, who in the room here currently has a fellow or a CSB? A couple of us in the room, okay. So really, what has that story back in September 11 got to do and relevant to where we are today on Friday, the 5th of October, 2018? Well, just before I came over from New Zealand, I happened to walk in and speak to my wife. And when I saw her, she asked me one simple question. She said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "I feel overwhelmed." Without even blinking an eye, my wife just turned round to me and said, "You know what? Time for you, Elias, to change your confession." How could she? She's supposed to be my wife. She's supposed to be the one who's supporting me, helping me, collaborating with me. I was so indignant, I turned on my heels and just walked out, stormed out into my car and drove off to my next appointment. Well, if you think about this, it's natural that I'd behave like that. We talk about terrorism when we think about things like 9/11. But it's not really my fault, because those who do not know, I was born in a country called Libya. Anybody heard of Libya? Yeah. In fact, if I wasn't standing here in front of you in a suit, but I was wearing the more traditional attire that another friend of mine from Libya, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, Uncle Mo as we like to call him, how would you think about me? What would your opinion be about me? What is our opinion about others, and what do they think about you when you're looking to go and speak globally? That's a question I get often asked when you are coming from one culture going into another. Now, you can't also blame me because of the way that I behave, because when I was growing up, though I wasn't a terrorist, there were acts of terrorism caused against me every single day. Acts of terrorism from my father, who used to call me an idiot daily. Now, you can't blame my father, because actually he was a very, very nice man. But it was the imprint on my father, from his father and his father's father, that caused him to behave the way that he behaved. And I'm sure that there are imprints that are on you about how do you yourself, operate in terms of your business. What are the reasons that you think you cannot have a global business, or you cannot go and get your fellow? What are the imprints that are causing you to hold yourself back? I'm going to use this as an interactive session. I'm going to give you some practical points of what you can do. Now, every single day, my dad used to call me an idiot. And allegedly, at the age of maybe 4 or 5, my mum said that I turned around to her and said, "Mum, can I have a knife so I can stab Dad in the back and kill him?" Ouch. Now, I can't tell you if this is a true story or this is a planted memory, but my mum used to repeat this story all the time, all the time, all the time. How do you think that affected my relationship with my dad? Well, I decided to go to New Zealand. Could I get any further away? No. If I went any further east, I'd fall off the edge of the world. Now, growing up being told that you're an idiot, I nearly, when I was going through school here in the UK, from 1970 through to 1995 when I left to go to New Zealand, I was at the bottom of my class. In fact, I tried to get into university here at Nottingham University. I couldn't even manage that, and I had to go to Kingston Poly. Kingston University now, I've got to update my CV. But how do you think I felt? Well, the good news is that when I eventually got into New Zealand, I became a Kiwi citizen. And there's a whole number of aspects of being a Kiwi I want to talk to you about. Because having joined New Zealand, one of the first things that I got was that I became a general manager in a financial services company with a portfolio of $160 million. In fact, I was a party president for a political party that contested the 2008 general election. And I used to be a senior consultant in the IT telecommunications sector, where we had 24 customers and a portfolio of billing portfolio of $450 million a year. Now, I am living proof for you that who you are today is just a reflection of your past. But what you can be in the future is up to you. Today, I stand in front of you as the president of the Global Speakers Federation. In fact, we had 2 past presidents, Leslie Everett and Alan Stevens, who were here before us. And you are part of a $1 billion industry with a reach of over 53,000 speakers and trainers. And probably we're impacting 50 million households a year. 50 million, conservatively, through the presentations we give, the training we deliver, or the books that we author. I've got one of the most recognizable global speakers in the room who influenced me when I was in Vancouver back in 2003, Frederick Haran, the president of APSS, a guy who I highly recommend. Go and see his presentation on main stage. Pleasure and honor to have you here, Frederick. Now, I want to ask you a question. 80%, what does that stand for? Can I have some guesses from the audience? Psychology, Burrito. Go on, what else? Any other ideas? 80%. Pareto principle is probably the most common answer I get to this. Well, the honest truth is that 80% was a staggering statistic we found out when we used to, as a senior consultant, go in and commission a program into a company where they'd be paying tens of millions of pounds to implement a system into their organizations based on a business case with a return on investment, an ROI, either to reduce the costs or to increase their revenues. But 80%, if not more, of the IT and telco projects that we delivered failed to produce that ROI. And the reason we found out was that that was based on corporate terrorism. People inside the organization sabotaging the projects. In fact, one of the biggest corporate terrorists is something called self-sabotage. I'm going to talk about this and talk about how, if you have any self-sabotage, what you can do to overcome that and how you can then look at a global opportunity to expand your business and get your fellow. So the question is, who are these corporate terrorists? What do they look like and what do they do? Well, self-sabotage, try and avoid them if you can. Just like the snakes. The trouble with self-sabotage is that it is invisible, it is insidious, and it is very paralyzing. If you have any situation where you are sitting there, as I was when I was going through my youth growing up here in the UK, being told that I was an idiot, being told that I couldn't succeed. If we keep whatever these imprints are on our minds through things that people have said to us in the past, what can you do to overcome this and to develop a global business and start to impact the world? Well, I figured out there's a 4-stage process. I'm not going to go into detail, but the most important stage is about building trust, and that's at the confidence level. You've got to build up your own confidence in yourself to pass that confidence on to your clients, to make sure that you're offering them a solution that's going to help them to grow and make a difference in their business. But before we do that, anybody here watch the Ryder Cup last week? Yeah? Okay, a couple of golfers amongst us. Well, let me introduce you to Charlie. Charlie and I go out for a regular round of golf. About every 2 weeks we're out there. And I hate when I go and play with Charlie because I can guarantee I will take a tee off and tee off down the first tee. And if I'm lucky, he'll go, I don't know, 120, maybe 125 yards. And he'll come up behind me and smack it through at least 25 yards more than me. Well, as I went off that particular day and told my wife I'm off to play with Charlie, sure enough, on the second tee, after I teed off, Charlie came up, took his tee, and then held onto his chest and keeled over. By the time I got home, I saw my wife and I said, wow, that was interesting. She said, what happened? I said, well, to be honest, it was awful because teed off, and then Charlie had this massive heart attack in the second hole. So that would have been dreadful. I said, yeah, tell me about it. All afternoon it was hit the ball and drag Charlie. Hit the ball and drag Charlie. Now the trouble is that Charlie is not always another person. What are you doing to yourself to become a Charlie? What are you doing that's stopping you and holding yourself back? So let's talk about disarming corporate terrorists. I'm going to share the 5 steps in the process of disarming and corporate terrorists by building trust, T.R.U.S.T. And I want you to take notes on these 5 elements of how you can build a global business. In fact, this is a good follow-on for those of you who are here seeing Leslie and Steve and Alan present earlier on, of what it is that you need to have to take a global business. The first thing is T for transparency. What are you transparent about? Are you transparent by being unique on what you're doing as opposed to being somebody else? Nothing worse than using somebody else's material and trying to be somebody you're not. Be you, be unique. Understand your disruptor. I remember being in Vancouver back in 2013, seeing Sean Weaver talk as the final keynote, talk about being a disruptor. And he really made an impression on me about how do you differentiate yourself in the marketplace. Uber had been a disruptor. Airbnb had been a disruptor. We were just in Berlin a couple of weeks ago, and sure enough, disruption was the theme of their conference. Are you developing relationships? Because if you want to be transparent with the relationships that you have. You already heard about Andy Lapata, who's one of the best networkers in the world, and he talks about relationships. And are you solving problems? And more specifically, what type of problems do you solve? In fact, you look at transparency. There's some areas of how you can go global, because you say to yourself, okay, if I'm transparent and I know myself who I am, how do I find opportunities internationally? Well, maybe you can look at bureaus. I'll talk a bit more about bureaus and what they're looking for, so you can have a good view. But it's already mentioned by Alan Stevens, embassies. Go out and reach out to your embassy. Why not get hold of them and see what they can do to get an expat community to come in and see you? Good grief. If you came out to New Zealand, the number of POMs, that's what we call ourselves, are numerous, and they just love the opportunity to come back and listen to somebody who's coming back from the UK, or if you're going to go to Singapore, or you're going to go to Australia, wherever the case is, South Africa, you'll find an embassy, you'll find an expat community. Maybe like Paul DeWall, President-elect of the Global Speakers Federation, he's got a great arrangement with one of his major clients, that they say to him, Paul, you do such a great job for us, let us know when you're in our countries where we have a branch office. So Paul can say, I'll take care of my travel and accommodation, you pay me my full fee. Is it worth your while if you're going to be in another country to develop relationships and you've already got an existing client? How many of you can go back at the end of this weekend and start going through your list of clients and ask yourself, how many of them have got international offices? And work your way through that. Transparency. You'd be surprised what you can find when you are transparent. The next aspect of building trust is the ring of steel. Well, what's the ring of steel? The ring of steel is something that I call like an inner circle. Ask yourself, who can you bring into your inner circle? Nelson Mandela, in my book, Liberating Your Leadership Potential, talks about the higher organ when he was imprisoned in Robben Island of the ANC, where they went to these people on a regular basis and asked them for advice. Who are you getting your advice from to go and talk internationally? In fact, are you selecting these people you can have regular meetings with? I call them almost like my own personal board of directors. These are people, sometimes, quite often, outside of the speaking industry. People who have got good credentials in business that I can go to and run some business ideas across. Because at the end of the day, we're in the business of speaking. And if you want a good business, ask yourself, are you using good business principles in what you do as you go out there? Because you want to then look for people in the speaking industry who are complementary to you. So I talk about leadership and building trust. But I've got some other people who focus around change in leadership or around sales. And I've used that, and I think Leslie and Alan and Sean are part of a mastermind group. Who here, by the way, is part of a mastermind group? Great. So if you look at the hands that are up around you, I can guarantee those of you who are in a mastermind are much more likely to have a strong business. Now, Leslie, you're in the US, correct? Yes. Sean's in Ireland, and Alan's in London, yeah. And Paul, in your mastermind group, where are the people based? Or yours?
West Kirby.
West Kirby, yeah, that's the...
Las Palomas.
Las Palomas.
And the Netherlands.
And the Netherlands. Global teams working together. I'm sure that Frederick will have... by the way, Frederick, how many countries did you speak in last year? 24 countries. That's, and in total, how many countries have you spoken in your career? 67 countries. Is it worth going out to these countries? Yes. Oh, yeah. Now, if the ring of steel is the R in trust, what's the U? The U is about understanding risks. It doesn't matter how many warning signs are out there. people still don't seem to understand the risks. And if you want to look at risks, go and find out what are the risks that are out there. In fact, the next slide just shows you some of the top 10 risks as identified. I think it's Aon who produced this particular report. Risks that are from brand and reputation through to cybercrime, retaining top talent. What are the risks in the segments that you operate in? Because if you can understand the risks for your segment, the likelihood is that you can then develop a solution to those risks that your clients are willing to pay you money for. So I'm going to encourage you to look at all the risks. And then the question is, if you're going to supply a solution, what sort of solution are you supplying? Are you supplying a solution that solves a £100 problem or a £1 million problem? Because if you're only solving a £100 problem, that's probably your challenge in terms of growing a global business. People are not going to pay you the full fee as a speaker or a trainer if you're just going to solve a £100 problem. Get out there and understand the scope of what the problem is. And I'll give you some examples of that on the next one, which is around security. So security is the S of trust. And for you, what are you doing in terms of security? Cybercrime sits at number 3, is the biggest risk that CEOs are looking at right now. Cybercrime itself costs $600 billion a year. That's $1.1 million per minute. What is happening out there? Do you understand that there's a threat analysis, a threat prevention, as well as threat awareness? So what are you doing to look at this from a security perspective? Now ask yourself the next aspect, and we already heard this through Alan and Leslie before. What are you doing when you go and travel internationally? Let me just put this up there. Be compliant. I don't care what anybody else has told you, and we heard this in the session earlier on, you cannot go to the US and just go on a traveler's visa or a B1 visa and expect to work there and get paid. It's going to cost you some money to get an O1 visa. Eamon managed to give me a very, very good lead for a lawyer in the US who I spoke to at length yesterday. It cost me $350 to spend an hour, just 1 hour with this lady, which I thought was a small amount of money. The cost of an O1 visa is approximately $7,000. It'll take me maybe 6 months. I know that Leslie's gone through quite a big situation to establish herself and her business in the USA. And there are so many things that are worth doing. Is it worth you spending $10,000 US because there's other ancillary costs that are going to be involved? Yes, if that particular country, for example, is one you want to regularly speak in. If I look at some of the fees that we have on average, let's say in New Zealand. New Zealand is a good market for us to speak in, and a reasonable speaker will probably get about $4,500. But if you go across the pond and go to Australia, you go up from 4.5 on average to about 8,000 on average. You go to the US, oh, by the way, that's in Australian dollars, which is worth more for us Kiwis. If you go across to the likes of the US, you're probably getting close to about 10,000 if you're a good qualified speaker. So when you look at all this, make sure that you've got the right visas. Make sure, especially if you're going to go and travel to the likes of Canada, you have all the documentation. And quite often, your client will help you procure all the right documentation, especially in Canada. If you don't believe me, just watch the Border Patrol programs and see how often they stop somebody coming over because they haven't got the right paperwork in front of them. And be very, very aware when you're traveling overseas. Be aware to make sure that when you're there, you are practicing safe security. Because you want to be careful. You don't want to just jump on any old Wi-Fi network. You want to make sure that you've got maybe some service that maybe people like Vodafone, I know from New Zealand, and probably here in the UK, will offer you a plan that you can take to 70 different countries around the world where you can use your own phone and the security of your own plan to do your internet banking, things along those lines. And be aware of what is happening in that local geography. Because there's certain places you want to go to, certain places you don't want to go to. I ended up going to Peterborough on the way here. Why? I don't know. It was halfway between London and Nottingham. But the point is that if you go and you do your research, you can find out a lot more about what's happening internationally and work your way through. So let's talk about the last T in trust, which is tracking. Now, there's a whole lot of tracking systems available. I'm going to talk about 3 that I want you to consider. You might want to write these down. First of all, are you using a CRM system? And you can have anything from Infusionsoft, or some like to call it Confusionsoft, which is so complex and so out there. But the reality is that's one of the most powerful systems that you can use as a speaker, all the way back through to I don't know, Zoho, or another CRM system, Capsule CRM. They're simple, they're effective, but what are you doing to keep a track of your activities? The second thing you want to consider is e-speakers. Who, by the way, here has heard of e-speakers? Let's have a show of hands. Okay, keep your hand up if you have a profile on e-speakers. Great. Now, through the Global Speakers Federation, an arrangement was set up with e-speakers that would allow you, as a member of PSA, to have an automatic access to the baseline profile. So if you haven't yet registered as a member of PSA and then go to eSpeakers, you can get that available for you. Now, the reality is that there are other services that will add on top of that. Now, most of the associations we know use eSpeakers to profile the members of their association through their website. We do that in New Zealand, they do that in the USA, and a number of other associations around the world. The question is, are you using it yourself? Now, because the Global Speakers Federation happens to have a total of 15 professional speaking associations around the world. Now, you might not be aware of this, but there's 2 things that are available to you if you want to speak globally. Number 1, if you wanted to, you can go and visit the APSS, which is the Asia Professional Speakers Singapore Convention, which was an incredible convention just held recently. I think it was back in May. 400 people. Yeah, as we said, 600 people, as we were speakers, but 250 people, they sold out the room. You can go and attend that conference at the same price as if you're a local member at APSS, because you're a member of PSA UK and Ireland. So you have also an ability, if you want to speak in a particular geography, let's say Singapore is the one, or Australia, you can apply, because you're a member of PSA UK and Ireland, you can apply to join the second membership, and there's a number of us in this room here who've got membership in more than one country. How many do you have, Frederick? 5. And Paul? 5. It makes sense, because if you want to be represented in those countries, and you're in at least 2, Leslie, I'm assuming you're in NSA? Yeah. So you can use those to give yourself more profile, because you then have that ability to network with the people. They'll be known beyond their website. They use e-speakers, and you have a profile on there. And all the event organizers go through that quite often, especially in the USA, to search for speakers that they want for their next conference. So let's go back and ask ourselves, what's the purpose? Fellow is the end game. So we've got a couple of minutes left. I want to share with you some simple tips of what you can do right now. Who'd like to know that? Yep, okay, good. So the first thing I want you to do is to use your OAR, O-A-R. What is that? Well, quite literally, it's about being one of a kind. That's the O. It's about affiliating, that's the A, and reaching out. Well, as you look at that, let me explain. Are you one of a kind? Is your topic so unique that you are known as the corporate counter-terrorist? Or another guy in Australia who's known as, well, what's he known as? There's so many different things. But how unique are you about yourself? Are you looking at not only just one of a kind, but affiliating? Are you going and working with other people and saying, how can I get somebody in that country to fill in a room and share an affiliate fee for the revenues that are generated when you go and speak there? And are you reaching out and developing your networks around the world? So let's look at what bureaus are looking for. The first thing that bureaus are looking for is stories. And what better than Jeff Ram, and we heard about it today, those who saw him speak in NSA in Dallas. What an incredible storyteller he is. How good are you at being a storyteller? We heard both Leslie and Alan turn around and say to you, you've got to be good. I'll come back and talk about that in a moment. Frederick has written an incredible book, which I highly, highly, highly recommend if you want to be a global speaker. What's the book called again about being a global speaker? How to become a global speaker. I mean, that's pure genius from one of the best global speakers in the world. And in his book, he keeps on telling us time after time, almost every one of his presentations came out of somebody seeing him present somewhere around the world. That's referred him to somebody else that's getting him business. But it starts off by being good at what he was talking about. Would that be right, Frederick? Yeah. So the next thing is about authenticity. It's pointless you trying to be Alan Stevens or Leslie Everett because those two spots are already taken. So be authentic, be you. They're looking for authenticity, looking for your stories that you can bring into the area. We also heard, and I think it was Leslie that said this, they're looking now for a 40-minute show reel. I was at the IASB, the International Association of Speaking Bureaus conference in Boston earlier on this year. And these are some of the tips they gave us. Why not create, and we've got a fabulous opportunity here at PSA in UK and Ireland, to have professional people come and take videos for you. How important, Leslie, would you say it is to have a good quality video of yourself speaking?
It's critical. That's exactly what meeting planners are looking for. They want to see you now.
They want to see you. They don't want a short clip. They want to see how do you handle it? How do you handle it when you stuff something up or the technology doesn't work? Are you editing out so you only have the good bits in there? No, they want to see the whole lot. So this was one of the bureaus in Australia said to me, look, every day I get so many people coming and say, oh, I want to join your bureau. Number one, have you got good stories? Are you authentic? Do you have a good show reel? Invest some money. Now, you might say to yourself, oh, but it costs a lot of money, Elias, to go and get a video produced. Well, I tell you what. Go and speak to Pete, who's here, and ask him how much he would charge. He's got a whole raft of services. We've got another guy called Gavin in New Zealand who we go to regularly. And Gavin will come around and he'll film you at your convention. And if all he does is produce the raw footage for you, it's up to you how you want to use it after that. And it doesn't cost that much, certainly not what I'm being charged to have this filmed here, compared to what it would cost for you to receive one keynote at your full fee. Is it a good investment? I think so. You also want to have some relevance because they're looking for things that are relevant to the topics that they are trying to address. And you have to give them some takeaways. So as we had a showcase of people coming through at the IASB conference, quite often you'd sit there and you'd listen and you'd say, oh, well, that was quite a good speaker. And then you'd look at the bureau guy next to you and he'd say, yeah, but what's the relevance to my audience? How can I pitch them and their topic in there? So let's pull this a bit further forward. And you want to go global. So let's talk about the Global Speakers Federation. And the Global Speakers Federation, as I mentioned before, is 15 different associations. I'm going to just throw a couple of these things up here on the screen. There are probably 4 or 5 different areas. NSA was the first of the speaking associations that was formed back in the 70s. And over time, we've seen them go and increase in different geographies in Europe, in Canada, South America, in Asia, Australasia, Australia, New Zealand. And when you look at this, you've got CAPS convention, CAPS, Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. Their next conference is in December, beginning of December in Vancouver. What a great opportunity for you to go at the same cost as a local Canadian member to go and expand and meet some of the international people. That was the very first conference I went to. Alan Stevens, over 20 years, has visited what we say 75 international conventions or national conventions. In my 5 years, I've been to 17. Because I was told that if you want an international business, go and help and start to spend time. I got to meet Leslie Everett and Alan and Frederick at that very first convention in Vancouver all those years ago. I met so many people. Where did we meet first? Was it Australia or was it UK? I can't remember. NSA, was it? GSS. GSS. Oh, that's right. Yeah, GSS in New Zealand. So you get to meet people from all around the world. So let's go and look at some of these other things. Australia, that's a massive English-speaking geography. Yes, you do have to get visas to go and work there, but there is a great guy, some of you might know, Cyril Courtleven. Cyril's a fantastic guy. Cyril comes up with a ladder and a banana. So have you ever seen Cyril's Keynote? Absolutely brilliant humor in that. Now, he went 4 or 5 or 6 times to New Zealand before he even got paid. Because he wanted to develop relationships out there. He invested in himself to get the right relationships going in these different geographies. So you can go to New Zealand. We've got our conference in March. That's the next global conference. In fact, they should have given to you, and I'm going to try and see if we can get them. There is a handout. Come back and see me later on today, and we'll see if we can get you a handout. It's got a list of all of the conferences coming up in the 15 different professional speaking associations. So you know the dates, you know their websites, and some of the themes associated with them. Now, for some of these, you might be able to put your name forward to potentially present, either as a keynoter on main stage or in a breakout session. And I encourage you to look at their websites to see the call for speakers and work your way through that. What else do you have? If you're in South Africa, there is PSA Namibia and PSA South Africa. PSA Namibia probably will be the location for the next Global Speakers Summit in 2020. We just had the last one beginning of this year in New Zealand. And again, it's a great opportunity to network with people with international businesses. Maybe in Europe, you want to go to either Malaysian Association, MAPS, the Philippines, or APSS in Singapore. We're looking at adding India into the mix shortly. We're talking about maybe Bangladesh, or even going to places like Zimbabwe, and maybe even Hong Kong. I know these are some of the countries that Frederick has been very influential in getting in front of. Maybe you're looking in Europe, and he was influential in helping to set up Sweden, which was his homeland for NSA Sweden. Paul?
Spain will start in January coming year.
Wow. Yeah, Paul, thank you for reminding me on that. So again, in Europe, what are the other ones? You've got GSA, the German Speaking Association. Paul, myself, a number of us were across there just 3 weeks ago. That's Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. Whilst you're still not in Brexit zone, make the use of that opportunity to speak across there. Maybe the French Speaking Association you want, or in Holland, or in Belgium. These are some of the different associations. Now we go a stage further than that, and we say that there is something called the Global Speaking Fellow. So this is something that's been put up for a number of years, and there's 4 key criteria for you to look at. We have a number of Global Speaking Fellows who are at the convention here. People like Frederick, people like Alan Stevens, people like Frank Furness, and there's a couple of others. Paul Dutoit, I think, is coming here as well. Now, what do you have to do if you already have your CSP or your fellow? You can qualify, but as you're working your way towards your CSP and your fellow, why not look at these simple criteria? First thing is you've got to have to have spoken 36 times. There's not really an awful lot of times you have to speak. Over the 5-year period leading up to the time that you apply for your Global Speaking Fellow. And you have to speak in 3 out of 5 of what they call the UN regions. If you go to the website globalspeakersfederation.net, I'll repeat that again, globalspeakersfederation.net. You'll find the details of how to find out. And if you're in these 3 geographies, you have to speak in at least 2 countries in each geography. Well, what does that mean? Let me explain how that works. Let's say that you've got a total of 4 different areas that you could potentially speak in. Look for 2 of these. You already speak in England or the UK, maybe Scotland, Ireland. But let's say you just choose England. That's one country. Maybe you happen to be working in the Middle East and you go to South Africa and you work in Dubai. I know that Andy Preston does a lot of work out there. Now, by the fact that you're in South Africa and Dubai, you've now ticked off 2 countries and 1 geography. So you've already qualified for one of the 3 regions. But let's say you went to Sweden and you're doing some work with NSA Sweden and you end up with a gig in Sweden. That gives you now 2 regions with 2 countries. Where else in Europe have you been speaking that you can add to it? Have you spoken in Ireland? Because Ireland and England are 2 separate countries. Scotland, Wales, considered 2 separate countries. And as you work your way through, your opportunity is to expand it all out. That's what the UN. How many countries did we say was in total? Was it you, Leslie, that said 200 and something countries, or Alan?
In total?
Yeah, around the world. 196. Yeah, 320, whatever you can make it, any number you like. Because 84.3% of all stats are made up on the spot, as we know. So what's the journey so far? Let's just recap briefly, and we've got a couple of minutes and might take a question at the very end. So the first thing is, have you found your confidence level? Because trust starts at a confidence level. You have to ask yourself, what can you do to overcome your imprints and your self-sabotage? Because I want you to really think about this and how can you build trust? What can you do now? Very simple, use your OR. Look at becoming one of a kind. You want to be in your area of expertise 1 inch wide, but 1 mile deep. You don't want to be a real generalist because quite honestly, how can you market a real generalist against everybody else? There's so many generalists out there. Unless you can find your niche, or niche as Leslie says in the US, what is your niche? Find out what it is and be a disruptor in that one key area. Start to work on that and use your mastermind group to do that. Look at affiliates. Ask yourself, who can I market with in a geography? I want to be in New Zealand. Who are the 3 key people in New Zealand with the largest lists that I can go to and say, hey, I'm coming to New Zealand. Paul, when you came to New Zealand for the Global Speakers Summit, were you able to find any business when you were across there?
Yeah.
Okay, where did you go to find your business?
I went to the embassy, they sent me to the Chamber of Commerce, and I ended with a Dutch Association of Business Owners.
So through relationships and reaching out, he went to the embassy, who took him to the Chamber of Commerce, who took him to a Dutch association. If you ask and you reach out and you plan this in advance, you'd be surprised how many opportunities you have for speaking globally. Now, the first time, maybe the second time you go to this geography, you might not turn around and have an awful lot of revenue that you can book. But you're developing relationships, which gives you enough time to then make the investment in all the proper visas and documentation to get you back there. And make sure that you have that ability to go and carry on speaking internationally. So beyond that, what I want to look at are 4 key steps for you to look at. Be yourself. Here are the 4 Bs. Be unique. Make sure that you are very unique in the marketplace. Be generous. Be generous with your time. And we heard Alan share the idea about going out and asking for some help. Sam Silverstein asking Alan for some help. In fact, when I was talking to Peter Brundle, who's the president of GSA, German Speaking Association, he turned around and he said, we'd love to have this community where we create an environment where we say, hey, Elias, I want to speak in New Zealand. Can you check my German presentation and make sure it's suitable for the New Zealand marketplace? If I do that, I might get 3 credit points. And I might take those 3 credit points and say, hey, Paul, I'm coming to Holland. Can I come and stay at your place? Because we're very friendly people in these. I can give him my 3 credits, which he can then use for something else in his environment. These are some of the ideas that we're looking at. But what can you do today to be generous? And be good. We heard this. In fact, I think Alan said be good, be very good, be bloody good, be really, really bloody good. And you've got to be really good. If you're no good as a speaker, they're going to call you back. I don't care. You can be quite humorous. Yeah, that's good, but you've got to be really good with your topic and with the presentation. You've got to refine it and try it and trial it. If you want to trial it on an audience that's going to be relatively simple, go to Lions, go to Rotary. They will accept speakers at the drop of a hat. Go and speak at the other PSA regions and ask them, but become good in what you're doing and be flexible. Be very, very flexible. Be willing to say, I'm going to go out of my comfort zone. This year, the year that I serve as president, I know that Leslie did something similar to this when she was president of the Global Speakers Federation. I will spend a total of 120 days of this 12-month period overseas. Now, not all of it's going to be paid, because I'm going to go to some countries where I've never had a presence before, but I'm going to network and meet people who are likely to give me introductions to other bureaus or other clients that will help me. So I want to just draw this to a close, and maybe we'll have a quick question at the very end. And I have to think that as I was sitting there in my car after my wife had told me to change my confession, I was absolutely livid. I had to remember that maybe if I did change my thinking, change the words that came out of my mouth, that maybe I should listen to the wise words of a very wise woman. Because everything starts with your confession. And I hope that you confess that you're going to become a fellow by going global. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, fantastic, fantastic talk. Thank you. Elias Kanaris. Thank you, Elias. And we do have another about 8 minutes or so, so if anybody's got any questions, I'll come around with the roving mic so we can actually pick this up on camera as well. So if anybody's got a question for Elias, we'll get round as many people as we can in 8 minutes. Who wants to start off? Stun them into silence. Okay, well, actually, I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
When you went to your first country, going to a different country to speak, what was the biggest thing you learned from doing a foreign gig?
The very first thing I learned is when I was doing some work overseas. I think Leslie mentioned this before, your accent. You guys have got a great asset. They love the British accent. I used to go do work with schools and school systems in the US, and they'd just be all over you because you guys have got something you can use. Even the Australians, the Kiwis, we can go through. Understand also, and you heard this in Leslie and Alan's session, make sure that your examples are relevant. Don't go to the US and start talking football, which we all know is the round ball, the original football, because they call it soccer. And similarly, if you're an American coming to the UK, don't talk about baseball or gridiron or football, whatever you want to call it. You know, they want examples that are relevant to that country. That's the first thing that I learned.
Fantastic. Anyone in the room would like to ask something? Maybe something to do with New Zealand. Hang on a second, let me run over. Give me some exercise.
Thank you. I was just wondering, what started you on your journey that's led you to being the Global Speakers Federation president?
Great question. Thank you for that. Well, when I joined National Speakers Association in New Zealand, I joined them in 2010, and by 2011 I quit. And I thought, you know what, this is a crazy group of people. I really don't want to be anything to do with them. And about 2 years later, a friend of mine said, hey, Elias, come back, have a look. So I went back and I saw somebody who presented at the next meeting. He said, this is how I received my CSP, Certified Speaking Professional, which is the equivalent of the fellow, FPSA. And I suddenly thought, oh, there's a business behind this. And as I started to work my way through, they said to me, Elias, be careful, be very, very careful, because they have their AGM shortly. They're going to choose people to volunteer in different roles. Whatever you do, do not make eye contact with the president. So I went around trying my best not to make any eye contact whatsoever. But unfortunately, at some point, our eyes must have met. And sure enough, I became the accidental president. Well, I say the accidental president because actually I became the senior vice president for the Auckland chapter. And then I went off on holiday to the US. When I was in the USA 5 weeks with my wife and my kids, I suddenly noticed one day towards the end of that vacation that our president, because I was going to spend a year underneath him to learn the ropes, was up either really, really late or very early in the morning. And so I reached out to him and I said, is everything okay? He said, okay. Can I help? No. Well, by the time I returned to New Zealand, my phone started to ring. I said, really? Ignore. And it rang again, rang again. So I picked it up and eventually had a coffee and they said, look, something's happened and the president's had to step down. Can you step up? I said, so much for the 1 year. Now, when I did this, I was at the board meeting and they said to us, hey, one of our members is a representative of the Global Speakers Federation. And Hannah Samuels at the time decided that she was going to quit and retire from the industry, having just received a certified speaking professional. We were looking for a volunteer to go there. Next thing I knew, my hand was up. No matter what I did, it still kept on going up. And the reason I say this is I asked Hannah for some advice, and she said, do you want an international business? I said, heck yeah. If you're in New Zealand, you've got to have an international business. So she said, if you want an international business, this is what I recommend. And her words are, attend as many international conferences as you can and volunteer to help that conference. So I went out, I got to meet Leslie across in Canada. I got to meet Alan and Heather again in Canada. I met a whole group of people all around the world. And then I was in the Australian convention and I met Andrew Bryant, who said, come over to Singapore, where I met Shirley and then Frederick and others. And at each time, I just asked one simple question, how can I help? So if you get the opportunity to serve within a PSA region, I'm going to encourage you to do that. Yes, it is inconvenient. Yes, it takes up some time. But is it worth it? Heck yes, if you're willing to serve and to help others. And that's the reason why I got into this journey. I had no idea it was going to end up across here, heading up a global entity. I'm glad to say that Paul DeWall is going to take over from me, so we're in very, very good hands going forward. And that's the reason. So I think we're out of time. Back to you, Alistair.
Thank you very much. One more time, ladies and gentlemen. Elias Kanaris. Thank you, Elias. Just got a little gift here to say thank you for giving up your time and for giving us such great tips. Really brilliant. Thank you very much. One more time for Elias, please. Thank you. And before you head off to lunch,